Thank you for joining me. So this is the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini for July 11th. Thanks for joining me. It's good to have you on. Hi there, Danielle. I see you. It's good to have you with. This is so funny. So it says right here that you're watching and inviting me to bring you on camera. And I tried to do this in another group that I'm in the other day. We wanted to do a joint stream with another, and the option wasn't there. And I cannot for the life of me figure out what criteria Facebook uses to decide who gets to invite someone on their live stream and who doesn't. It's kind of frustrating, I think. But welcome. I'm excited to have you with. So tonight, or excuse me, tomorrow, of course, is the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. We're doing a day ahead of schedule with the lunar live streams now for a couple of reasons. Partly because we have viewers from all over the world, and I live in the past compared to the rest of the world just by nature of being the mountain time zone here in the US. And so I've decided to start doing these a day ahead so that they're a little more fresh for folks who are watching from other parts of the world. Plus, it gives us a little extra time to get the edits done after we do the live stream and get them posted to the YouTube channel and get them posted to the website. So, thanks for joining me. Of course, we still have the day before, the day of, and the day after any lunation when they're the most powerful. And of course, the 10 days following to take advantage of the energy. So, always, always, always use your lunars. They're powerful energy, and eclipse especially so. We like to call them a new or full moon on steroids, and they very much are. But again, I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick Astrology, and we're using the Fagan Bradley Sidereal Zodiac tonight, which is what I use in my Western Sidereal Astrologer. The idea is I like to work with folks to help them reconnect with their soul purpose and remember why they came into the world to begin with. And my aim with the broadcast is always to help provide guidance on how we can consciously use the energies of the transiting planets to kind of affect our lives in a positive way. Jennifer is on. Good to have you on, Jennifer. So if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements, you can do that at the website at mysticphysick.com/sidereal tools. And I have a link. I'm going to post it in the comments real quick, just in case anyone does not have their sidereal chart, or maybe if you don't know your sidereal placements. I have to adjust my browser size real quick to get the comment box to pop up for me. I squish it down for the live stream so that it doesn't get in the way of my notes, and then the comment box disappears because I squish it too small. One of those things. Hi, beautiful, pretty gorgeous yourself, lady. Thanks for that awesome deodorant. I love it. It's amazing. Your products are wonderful. And Jana's on. Good to have you, Jana. I'm going to be sharing some of Jana's goodies with y'all hopefully here in the coming couple of weeks. So I've been working on the 2019 astrological planner, which some of you don't need yet because you're still using the 2018 astrological planner. However, I had been asked to put together a academic version, and of course an academic planner would be starting right about now. I'm a little behind schedule just because I've had a whole plate in the last couple of months, but I'm excited about getting this put together. And Jana is an artist, and she makes some absolutely amazing disc-bound notebooks out of her own original art that are astrological themed. So you can pick your zodiac sun sign out of her beautiful art. And I'm excited to share that with you guys because this year I'm releasing a disc-bound version of the astrological planner, so that in future years, if you want, all you have to do is buy the refill and, you know, keep a nice durable disc-bound notebook with your planner in it. So very exciting changes for this year. I was going to save all that for the end of the broadcast, but I saw Jana on and I couldn't help myself. Jennifer says, yay, so happy to hear that you like it. Yes, I love it. I love it. So the new moon is actually exact tomorrow at about 10:48 p.m. That's Eastern Daylight Time, I believe. Now, I'm going to be kind of confused about this because I have been working with two different types of astrological software to put together the planners and they don't use the same time zone calculation for Eastern time. The one that I normally use to put together your planners actually uses UTC -4, which is Eastern Daylight Time. And then I have another software that uses UTC -5, which would be Eastern Standard Time, I believe. However, I'm pretty sure one of those pieces of software has not been updated for the fact that there have been changes to when daylight savings time goes into effect and when it ends. So, 10:48 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, pretty sure, but we can double check that, okay? But this is a new moon solar eclipse, which those open up opportunities. They open up paths, bring opportunities into our lives for us to pursue new directions, new avenues, new changes. Okay, and this particular new moon solar eclipse happens opposed Pluto in Sagittarius, which means that it's an incredible opportunity to transform the way that we think. And in fact, for some people, because it's at opposition to the new moon, for some people it might actually create a crisis that will force that to happen. Okay, oppositions can sometimes create crisis points in our lives. Just in terms of how planetary transit us. A conjunction will initiate a cycle, hit the first point of tension at the square coming off the opposition, a crisis point, or excuse me, coming off the conjunction, a crisis point usually, or sometimes just like a big event at the opposition, and then as you make the second square, closing that circle, you're able to move more towards a resolution. And usually between the last square and the next conjunction, that's when the resolution can come into place. And of course, the next conjunction opens up a new cycle. So this is typically how planetary movement can affect us. Generally, it's that same idea no matter the planet, but the particular planets involved and what signs they're in are going to flavor and describe how we experience those transits. Just something interesting to keep in mind. So what you'll want to do is grab your natal chart and have a look to see if it points at 25 or 26 degrees of Gemini, or really of any air sign or any fire sign. Okay? Partly because eclipses happen in cycles, in pairs, in opposite signs. Partly because they happen in families. And so any air sign, if you have a planet or point at 25 or 26 degrees, is going to be activated by a trine to that planet or point, okay? Or possibly a conjunction if you have it in Gemini. If you have a planet or point at 25 or 26 degrees of a fire sign, it will happen in opposition by what we call bipolarity. There's a word for it, and I'm drawing a blank, and I didn't put it in my notes. I'm trying to think. There's a word for it. Anyway, what happens in one sign can actually activate the opposite sign, and there's a word for that. There's a word for that, and why I'm drawing a blank on it, I don't know. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that you, for instance, I'm going to grab a chart so that I'm visualizing this correctly. You could, for instance, have a planet or point at 25 or 26 degrees of a sign by square. So for Gemini, let's look and see. By square, this would be Pisces or Virgo, or Sagittarius, of course, is an opposition. But in Pisces or Virgo, if you have a point in one of those two signs at 25 or 26 degrees, you could still potentially feel the impact of the eclipse, but you would feel it in a more challenging way because it's happening at a square to your planet or point. Okay, so something else to keep in mind. If you're feeling it through a fellow air sign, it's probably not as challenging. It's probably a little more favorable for you. Okay? If you don't have a planet or a personal point at 25 or 26 degrees of an air or a fire sign, or of Pisces or Virgo, don't sweat it. What happens in that situation typically is you'll still notice the effects of the eclipse, but through other people in your lives. Things will happen to them, not to you directly. So sometimes that means you feel it through your partner, or you feel it through your children, or you feel it through your coworkers. Okay, so just some other ways that you can still notice the effects of the eclipse even if you're not directly personally impacted by what happens. Okay, just some interesting points to note. So what we normally do with the new and full moon broadcasts, I'm kind of going to adjust this here a little bit, is I will go over by sidereal rising sign what house this is falling in, the themes of the house. Danielle says, my midheaven is at 22 Sag, and that is really close enough to be within range, Danielle. And so for you, that would affect you in the more public facing side of your life, right? It could potentially impact your status or your reputation. It could impact your career or your professional life. Or it could just impact, like I said, the public side, what people see publicly about you. Jonna has Chiron at 23 degrees Aries. Okay, so Chiron is a fascinating asteroid in the chart. He is the archetype that we call the wounded healer. And so Chiron is a body that speaks to where we suffer deep personal pain. Okay? A deep personal wound that can sometimes be quite challenging to heal. However, bringing about our own healing usually gives us a gift that allows us to help others heal if they suffer a similar wound. And it can be one of two ways. Either through our own healing, we learn what it takes to heal it and we're able to share and teach that to others, or we're able to share and teach others how to heal that wound quite naturally, but just struggle to heal it in ourselves. And so it can play out a couple of different ways. Those are the two most common ways. But watch for that, Jonna, to touch on a personal wound or a healing ability that you have. And Uranus in Libra. And that can be sudden events. It can be accidents. It can be humanitarian and activist kind of stuff. It can also be impulsive and rebellious behaviors. So watch to see how that triggers too, Jonna. And if you keep a diary or a notebook or even a day planner, take notes about what happens to you and when, because then you're able to go back and look at what transits were going on when things were happening and kind of get a feel for how transits affect you more specifically. Eclipse time may be a good opportunity for you healing them, simply because eclipses bring change, permanent change. They can often force things to happen in a way that we just don't have any control over. We just have to deal with them. And so it could be a healing crisis that you face in conjunction with this particular eclipse. So what I want to do first is kind of jump in rising sign and talk about what house this particular new moon solar eclipse is going to happen in for you and the themes of that house. And that way, if you're not familiar, you can just jot down the themes and you can choose to work directly with that. And that way it aligns the energy with your own movement. However, because it's an eclipse, I would really encourage you to consider using it in whatever way you feel most inspired to use it. Mars retrograde has been bad enough for me. I know. In my house too. Mars retrograde, and now we're going to have Mercury retrograde on top of it. It'll be a fun couple of weeks. Plus Mars is out of bounds, right? So if you have Aries rising, this is a third house new moon for you, and third house solar eclipse. And the third house, of course, governs themes of travel and communication primarily. Now, this is local travel. Travel happens near to you, and I tend to give the rule of thumb anywhere within about 500 miles, sometimes closer. Anything farther away than that, and I think entering into ninth house territory, okay? But local travel over short distances, childhood education, mental acuity and mental capacity, siblings, neighbors, immediate environment, transportation. Okay, so this could affect transportation issues if you have Aries rising. If you have Taurus rising, it's a second house, a new moon for you, which is a fantastic opportunity to have happen at eclipse time. Second house, of course, course, earning wealth and possessions, earned income, movable assets. It also governs expenses. What I like to encourage folks to do when there's a new moon in the second house is, if you've been thinking about starting a side hustle or getting a second job or something like that, or just kind of creating a secondary source of income for yourself, do it. Because then when we have the full moon in that house 6 months from now, you'll be in a position to start reaping the rewards of that, the financial rewards, okay? But definitely at eclipse time, that can be a powerful opportunity. If you have Gemini rising, like I do, this is a first house new moon for you. So that has to do with personality, identity, self-expression, the physical body, so your image and appearance, but also kind of your self-image. Also has to do with the role that you play in the world, your behaviors, your mannerisms, that sort of thing. So this is an opportunity to begin a new role that may be unfamiliar to you, or just new and exciting even, if you have Gemini rising. For Cancer rising, it's 12th house. So this is the unconscious mind. It's privacy and seclusion. It's spirituality. The 12th house governs our tendency to retreat from the world, and even our urge to escape. And so you'll feel this one very personally, but in your private life, okay? For Leo, it's 11th house. So that's going to have to do with friends. It's going to have to do with your social life. It's going to have to do with organizations, clubs, or associations that you belong to. And my favorite, and dreams. So when you have a new moon in your 11th house of hopes and dreams, it's a fantastic opportunity to take a step towards manifesting a long-held dream that you've had. And that's one of my favorite ways to use a new moon in the 11th house. And especially with it being an eclipse, like I said, new moon on steroids, definitely take advantage. For Virgo, a 10th house new moon. So that has to do with career. It has to do with your professional life. It has to do with awards and recognition as well. So this is a new moon that has to do with achievement, also status and reputation, okay? For Libra, it will be 9th house. So this is where we get into long distance travel, also long distance communication, things like broadcasting, higher education also falls into the 9th house, religion, philosophy, legal matters, immigration. Those are all 9th house concerns. For Scorpio, it's 8th house. So this is other people's money, resources that come to you through the people in your life, especially a partner. Money that you borrow, debts that you have, taxes, and that could be taxes that you owe or refunds of taxes that are due you. Inheritance, insurance, if you earn money by bonus or commission income, that falls under the 8th house as well. And then of course, excuse me, some more esoteric types of concepts fall into the 8th house, like death and rebirth and transformation. And so this is an important one to pay attention to, because we do have Pluto in opposition to it, and that could definitely activate some death, rebirth, or transformation things for some folks, okay? For Sagittarius rising, this is going to be a 7th house new moon solar eclipse for you. So partnership and marriage, right? Business, your relationships with other people in general. And then also, it's what we reject or deny about ourselves, and that's usually pointed to by the descendant, which is the exact opposite point in your chart of the ascendant. Okay, and then for Capricorn rising, this is a 6th house new moon for you. So work, health, pets, daily routines, habits. Great time to establish a new habit, a positive habit, especially one that can have a positive impact on your health or on your schedule. If you're trying to free up more time, think about ways that you might use this new moon for that. For Aquarius, it's 5th house. So creativity, true love, romance, children, all those things fall under the 5th house. Pleasurable activities, basically. And that can include sports, and it can include risk-taking activities. So things like gambling fall under the 5th house. And then for Pisces, finally, this is a 4th house new moon. And so that's going to have to do with home and family, with real estate, later life, generally retirement age or beyond. Also has to do with your parents, and it can be either one or both parents if you have this as your 4th house new moon. So if you're joining us late and you've missed your rising sign, just type your sidereal rising sign into the comments and I'll recap for you. And in the meantime, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the Gemini archetype. And some of this we've talked about before, some of it we haven't. We're going to forge some new paths this time around. So Gemini is the archetype of the twins, right? So this we want to talk about specifically when we talk about Gemini or Castor and Pollux, right? But Gemini as the twins can also sometimes be representative of Cain and Abel. And sometimes you'll find it referencing Adam and Eve. So maybe twins, but not necessarily the same gender. The male-female duality, the male-female that balanced archetype there, right? So Julie says she has Taurus rising. So let's recap Taurus really quick. And I just brain dump all this stuff so I don't have to remember it. So I'm going to scroll back up in my notes and double check. Taurus, I think, is 2nd house. Yeah, Taurus is 2nd house. So wealth and possessions, movable assets, money we earn, and expenses. And if you jumped in late, Julie, one of the things that I touched on with 2nd house new moons is that they are a fantastic opportunity to look at adding to your income, whether that's through a second job or a side hustle or just kind of, you know, creating some other avenue for income and wealth to flow into your life. Typically, we're talking about money that comes to you from the work that you do every day, the work that you do with your own 2 hands. So not investment income, but that's not necessarily taken to mean that it can't be passive income of some kind. So if you've been thinking about ways that you can create passive income for yourself, especially that have to do with the type of work that you do serving people on a daily basis, this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. She says, that's awesome because I have a meeting about something like that on Friday. Ooh, that's very, very exciting. So I will wish you good luck on that. But tonight, this would be a great time to set your intentions. And more specifically, once we get there, to talk about what kind of story you want to tell around that, what kind of experience you want to have. Tonight, we're going to talk a bit about telling. So when we left off, before we had the interruption, we were talking about Gemini archetypes, okay? And Gemini being the writer and the communicator. More specifically, the storyteller and also the messenger. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is the messenger of the gods, right? He also represents the wanderer, the student and the teacher, and also the trickster. And tonight we're going to explore that trickster idea a little bit more in depth. So one signature of the trickster is using your words against you, right? So I want to pull an example here of, say, like the genie in the bottle who grants wishes what you said and not what you meant, right? So maybe taking your words a little too literally, that kind of tricking. And pursuing that path, what I want to do with you tonight is kind of explore how explaining and complaining can be tripping us up in terms of manifesting what it is we want. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can work on mindset issues by staying in the question. And we're gonna look at how we can turn our mental storytelling around, because oftentimes what we experience in life, the reality that we manifest for ourselves, is just a reflection of the story that we're telling. And oftentimes, if you think back enough, you started probably telling the story first, and that has just perpetuated your experience. So we're going to talk about how we can tell new stories about our lives with this Gemini new moon solar eclipse. Okay, so I'm kind of curious, and pipe in if you feel this applies to you. You can let me know in the comments. if you feel compelled to explain why things happen the way they happen in your life, or why they aren't happening the way you want, if you always find that you're explaining why you can't have what you want. For instance, here's the one that I think most of us are familiar with. I can't afford that. I want that thing, but I can't afford that, right? That's telling a story. It's explaining why we can't have the thing that we want, right? So if you constantly find that you're looking for why your situation is the way it is and trying to explain it, that's probably becoming a stumbling block for you in terms of creating the life that you really want, okay? And so, for instance, here's a good example. Do you regularly complain about health? Do you complain about getting old, or aches and pains in your body? Or do you complain about your eyesight or your memory? Or do you complain about your partner, your family, your financial situation? Okay. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you experience no improvement around those things, regardless of how much you put in, regardless of how much you try? And if you do, I want you to consider whether or not the complaining and the explaining is maybe part of why, because you're telling a story. I know, Julie, we're getting deep with this one, huh? I wanted to take it a step further because we are at the eclipse. This is powerful energy, and it's powerful energy for making intentional change in your life. And so I did want to kind of explore a little deeper with this particular new moon, with the intention setting. But I want to give you a hint. If you're experiencing no improvement, it's because your words and your thoughts are undermining your desires and your efforts. Okay? So I would challenge you instead to take time to appreciate and tell the story of what you would like instead of the story of what you don't like. Okay? And here's my main point behind this. Explaining why we are where we are is a convenient way of shifting responsibility for the situation that we're in. So what it does is it's a method of externalizing blame, which is here nor there. But what that also does concurrently is it externalizes our power to change our circumstances. Okay? Explaining quite simply gives away our power. So does complaining. Okay? Julie says, absolutely, you just described much of my private language. Your self-talk is important here. Okay? And I would say, especially for those who have this as a 12th house new moon in Gemini, you might want to look at developing some new self-talk, some positive self-talk. Okay? Oftentimes, the self-talk that we perpetuate is a way of speaking to and about ourselves that we picked up from our parents, or we picked up from a partner, maybe someone we've been with a really long time, and not necessarily that they talk to us that way, but if we have a partner that talks to themselves that way, it's so easy to pick up each other's habits, right? Whether you want to or not, whether they're healthy or not. And so if you spend a lot of time with someone else who does this, you might have picked up on it too, even if you never used to do it. But regardless as to the cause, regardless as to the why, and regardless as to our own blamelessness, no one else will be accepting the responsibility either. Okay? That's a guaranteed point right there, which means the only way to extract ourselves from any kind of unwelcome predicament or situation, uncomfortable situation especially in our lives, is to take action ourselves. And in doing so, we accept responsibility for our own outcome. Okay? Now, what I want to point out in this is the word because. It has a huge amount of power. And I know this is one we've talked about before too. Anecdotally, I'm going to relate, and some of you may have read about this study as well. It is a behavioral study, a sociological study, had to do with people cutting in line or asking to cut in line to use the copier, right? And so in this study, they had people ask to cut in line to use the copier and not give a reason why they need to cut in line. And then they had Other people ask to cut in line but give a reason. And sometimes the reason was as simple as because I'm in a hurry. And what happened was the folks that gave a because and a reason why were more likely to be allowed to cut in front of someone who had already been waiting in line. Okay? That's the power of the word because. So as you set your intentions tonight, one thing that I want you to think about including around what it is you want is the because, the why it is you want it. Okay? So think about including the because. Okay? We can use that word to empower ourselves just as easily as using it to cut in line at the coffee machine. Okay? So I want you to think about this. If until now you've been telling a story of blamelessness or invested yourself in explanations as to why you are where you are, then this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is challenging you to transform that, to turn it around and to tell another story. One that empowers you rather than making you blameless, rather than making you the victim of circumstances. Okay? So if you've been making excuses for not having what you want, i.e. I can't afford that, in other words, describing the experience that you have instead of the one that you want, how can you turn that into a question and open yourself up to infinite possibilities? My favorite way with I can't afford that is to say, how can I afford that? How can I afford that? I have this thing that I want a whole lot. You know what I want a whole lot? I want to go to Cape Canaveral in January for the Kepler conference. That's what I want. How can I afford that? Ask the question from a place of absolute, genuine, childlike wonder. Okay? Don't be sarcastic. Don't be bitter. Get in a place of childlike wonder when you ask it. And remember, Gemini is the natural ruler of the third house, which describes our childhood experience, right? Tap into that inner child energy as you do this. So turn it into a question instead of making a statement about what you think your experience is going to be. Now, some of you may have seen this meme on, especially if you're on Facebook a lot. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it has to do with, that's why it's called spelling, right? And it's kind of, I think, a play on like spell casting, right? That's why it's called spelling. I want to connect that to the notion of vibrational frequency, right? What you manifest always matches the vibrational frequency of the words that you speak and think, okay? In the Bible, creation is referred to as the Logos, right? That literally means the Word. The Word of what? The Word of God, right? Words literally have the power of creation as you speak them and as you think them, okay? So for tonight's intentions, what I want you to consider are, how can you tell a different story? How can you reframe or rephrase the story that you've been telling to reflect what you actually want to experience and not what you don't want to experience? Okay? How can choosing a new story empower you in your life? What is your new question? How will you turn around your tendency to describe and define and therefore limit your experience in order to open yourself up to infinite possibilities? What is your new question? What is your because? And does it empower you or disempower you? And if it disempowers you, how can you reframe it? How can you practice telling a new story? And what I would challenge you to do is, after you write your intentions for this evening, in the coming weeks, in the coming days and weeks especially, practice telling that new story anytime you catch yourself explaining or complaining or criticizing, whether that's yourself or others. Okay? So to recap, I'll go over the prompts once again, and if anyone wants me to recap what rising sign, what house and this is falling in by rising, the themes of that house are, just let me know what your rising sign is in the comments, and I'll do that. But here are the prompts again. We'll go over them. How can you tell a different story? And how can choosing to tell that new story empower you in your life? What is your new question that you're going to create based on the statements that you keep making about how things are? What is your because? Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes, grab your pen and paper, and spend a few moments setting an intention around the new story that you're going to begin telling. And I will read from you. So from the moon gazing journal, we do this every new moon. For today, our little piece is the moon moves within 218,000 miles of the Earth's surface. This proximity causes a gravitational pull that creates high and low tides in the waters on Earth. This pull also affects groundwater, and for centuries, gardeners have taken advantage of the moon's cycles. There you go. Let's set those intentions. Very excited for this. If anyone needs more time, let me know. And in the meantime, I'll share with you my intention for this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. So I have Gemini rising by the Sidereal Zodiac. And so for me, I'm kind of excited to tap into this in terms of the role that I play in the world. And not necessarily stepping into a new role, but stepping with fresh energy and enthusiasm into a role that I have embodied in the past, but kind of gotten away from in the last couple of years. So I'm an artist as well, and actually I was an artist before I was an astrologer. And I've set that aside in the last few years, not necessarily intentionally, but just by dint of the workload that I've taken on as an astrologer. And one of the things that I was wanting to do this year, while Jupiter is in Libra, because that's my 5th house, right, is spend more time making art and creating art, which I haven't really done at all, quite frankly. And so I'm a little disappointed in myself with that. I noticed that primarily that revolves around the story that I tell about how much time I have, or the story that I tell around how busy I am, which it's a great thing when you work for yourself to be busy. You know, I mean, that's really kind of wonderful, right? But I don't want to be so busy that I don't ever pursue my first love, which is art and painting. And so this year, what I want to do is make some extra effort to apply for things like art shows, and to apply for, there's a local grant that I could apply for, grant opportunity that's come up that would be really wonderful because it's not restricted funds, and I could use it to repair my studio space, which is currently, you could call it under construction. That would be putting it nicely. Okay. But that's really what I'd like to do with this particular new moon, is step more fully into my role as an artist. And so what I've written here is that I intend to step fully and with commitment into my role and identity as an artist with this new moon. And I will do this by spending 3 to 5 hours per week in my Beach Brand You coursework. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Beach Your Brand You, but it's a program that I signed up for several years ago, and I've never applied it to my art career. And it's just starting again. A couple of days ago it actually began. It's a 12-week program, and so I want to go through it for a second time, but apply everything that is taught in that program to my art career. And so that's really what I'd like to do over the next 3 months. Okay. So I will do this by spending 3 to 5 hours per week in my Be True Brand You coursework, by updating my artist website, by applying for grants and art shows locally. And when asked, what do? I will introduce myself as an artist and astrologer instead of an astrologer and artist, right? Which is what I normally do. And I will commit to creating art at least one day a week. That's my intention that I'm setting for this new moon. And so this is definitely going to require commitment on my part. It's going to require me freeing up space in my schedule to do these things, but in a way that's holding space for my creative urge, right? It's almost a sacred space when we're talking about creating. Creating is an amazing thing to do, and we all have the power to create in our lives, and it's something that, at least artistically, I put on the back burner. Now, typically, with a new moon, we would encourage you to take your first step towards whatever your intention is at the first light of the new moon, right? Which usually happens within a day or two after the new moon. And so with the new moon being exact tomorrow, I would say then, let me look at a calendar and kind of see what date I would recommend. We would normally, I would say then, be looking at taking our first action around the 14th or 15th. And I would think that if you have something very important that you'd like to do, you might want to use those dates. We're in Mercury's retrograde shadow. He's retrograding, I believe, on the 26th. Let's look at the planner and see what the planner says. I believe it's the 26th that he actually stations retrograde. So that retrograde building up power. Some of you have probably noticed it. I flipped to June, of course. So Mars retrograded on the 26th of June, and that may be where I'm pulling that date from. Where? Where do you retrograde, little Mercury? On the 26th. So I was right. He retrogrades on the 26th. Now, often we wouldn't necessarily want to begin anything super important while Mars is retrograde, but I think we can safely and successfully set our intentions. And if nothing else, even if you're not comfortable taking action towards something because of the retrograde energy with Mars and Mercury specifically, because those are personal planets, right? What I would definitely encourage you to do is stay with this intention during the time that you would normally be taking action, and spend that time visualizing, spend that time in affirmations, and spend that time becoming the author of your new story around what it is that you want to bring into your life, around the end result and the outcome. Even if you choose to wait to take action till the next new moon, keeping in mind that eclipses have a range of influence for up to 60 days either side. So you could wait till the next new moon to take action, or even the new moon 2 months from now, and take action on this intention and still have the power of the eclipse behind it. But I would definitely encourage you to use the eclipse energy in your visualizing, in your storytelling, and in affirming what it is that you want. But keep in mind, the idea with this one is telling a new story and not the same old story. The story that's keeping you from manifesting what you want, the story that revolves around explaining why you don't have what you want in your life, or complaining about what you're experiencing in your life, or even a story that revolves around criticism or negative self-talk. Let's take this opportunity to turn those things around with this particular new moon. And so I would say definitely use the coming week to do the inner work, even if you don't take the active outer steps. Julie says, my intention is around my physical fitness. Can you think of any reason why I should wait until the retrogrades are over? No, I cannot think of any reason why you should wait until the retrogrades are over, especially with physical fitness. And here's part of the reason, Julie. With Mars retrograde, we tend to be irritable and more easily angered by frustrations and delays. We tend to get into fights more frequently. And it's because we have this aggressive energy that Mars represents that's bubbling up. It's a lot closer to the surface, especially for those of us who tend to kind of, like if you tend to suppress your anger or that type of response. What can be a very excellent and healthy way to deal with that aggressive Mars energy while he's retrograde, and especially while he's retrograde in Aries, which he will be until the 24th, is to engage in sports activities. Anything that's going to burn off a lot of physical energy. It will help release that pent up aggression that might come up, especially around delays or obstacles or minor irritations. You may have noticed that minor irritations are a lot more likely to make you angry right now, even if they normally wouldn't make you angry. That's the kind of stuff that Mars retrograde will trigger. And so yes, finding a physical outlet, whether that's, you know, a punching bag or kickboxing or even a competitive sport, because Mars is a very competitive energy as well. Competitive sports can be a great way to burn off that aggressive energy. So I would say for you, absolutely don't wait to take action on that, and at least take your first steps towards that new physical fitness habit that you're wanting to cultivate on the 14th or 15th. That would be the perfect time to start. Okay. And if anyone else has any questions about what your intention is specifically and wanting guidance on whether or when to take your first initiative action, keeping in mind that it's that first action that is the genesis of the venture. And normally we would counsel you to not take that during a retrograde period, because then you build that retrograde energy into the entire, right, for the life of it. It's like the birth chart of whatever it is that you're undertaking, right? But you can still work with the energy mentally and energetically through, like I was saying, through visualizing, through affirmations, and through storytelling. Specifically with the new moon in Gemini, you want to focus on telling a different story and make it be the story of what you want and not the story of what you don't want. Okay, so if you've been telling the story of what's happening that you aren't happy with, knock it off and start telling the story of what it is you want to experience. Okay? Let me grab my notes here just really quickly and see what I have for the announcements. So we already kind of talked about the astrological planner, the 2019 astrological planner, so stay tuned for that. This is why I didn't post yesterday. So this is my checklist of all the things that I go over to make sure that there are no errors or mistakes in your planner. And I'm really close to checking all those boxes. See that? So we're super, super close to being at a point where those will be available, and I will let you know as soon as that happens. Coming up on Monday, what date is Monday? Coming up on Monday the 16th, we have our next Sidereal Insights Astro Update. So join me for that. That's at 1:30 Mountain Daylight Time, 3:30 Eastern Daylight Time, or 8:30 British Standard Time, or 5:30 in the morning if you're watching us from Australia, which some of our friends are watching from Australia. So join me for that. I'll give guidance on current transits and how you can work with them, how you can deal with them. I do have planned, and I know I told you last time we chatted, I haven't set a date yet. I do have planned to do a presentation specifically on eclipses and how you can use eclipses and navigate them. Stay tuned for that, because I do want to get that particular presentation done here in the near future. That'll be on the Mystick Physick Astrology Facebook page, same as the Sidereal Insights Astro Updates. So watch for that. And then, of course, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and that way you won't ever miss a broadcast, whether it's an Astro Update or one of the lunar live streams like we are doing tonight. So thank you all for joining me. If you're joining late, be sure and catch the replay, because we did talk about some really juicy stuff early on before we did our intention setting, and you won't want to miss it, because this is an eclipse. It's an opportunity to really go deep and to affect some significant change in your life. So it's a great way to set intention for the upcoming new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, which is exact tomorrow. And we'll talk to you on Monday, and enjoy. Best wishes to everyone for your new intentions.